Okay, so this chapter is not nearly so difficult. You'll have a bunch of vocab to learn and some new noun forms which you will really need to learn, but conceptually, there's not much new going on in this chapter. Maybe one new big idea. So the first bit of grammar is your third person plural form. So your third person singular is the he, she, it, Steve form, right? Where the speaker is not the subject, the interlocutor is not the subject, it's someone else, but a singular someone else for the third person singular. This, of course, is the plural. So this is the they form, right? Loosen. They loosen. Filusi. They love. The example is given here. Now, it doesn't have to be they. You don't have to add the word they if there's another subject in the sentence. So I will sometimes get students who read a sentence that says, Steve and Mary are walking, right? And what they'll translate it as, Steve and Mary, they are walking. You don't need that extra they, right? Steve and Mary are the subject of the verb, of a third person plural verb. So this is they or any plural subjects that don't include either the speaker or the interlocutor, the other person being spoken to. Good. The other plural you learn is the imperative plural right here. So this the second person singular imperative is the first form you learned, something like spoude, hurry, or file, a command to love, or elthe, come here. That is just, the ending there is just the epsilon. It's an epsilon, and in the case of phileo, that epsilon is adding on to another epsilon, and you get this weird form. But generally speaking, it's just an epsilon, a second person singular imperative. But to create the plural, it becomes ete. You get epsilon, tau, epsilon. So you've got spoudete or philete. Same thing's happening. The two epsilons are combining into an epsilon iota. Elthete. Now, the verb to be will always be irregular, and it doesn't fail us here. The second person singular is isti, be something, be some way, and este is the second person plural imperative, so telling multiple people to do something. So the example, a common example to teach this is a greeting in Greek is kaire, be happy. It's a command to be happy. And that's how you address one person, how you say hi to one person. But if I'm saying hi to an entire classroom, I would say kairete, where I'm commanding the whole class to be happy. Here's the one conceptual, one new idea in this chapter, and that is the infinitive. Now, the infinitive is technically a verbal noun. At least that's the way I think about it. It is built out of your verb form. So you're going to use a verb dictionary entry, and you're going to use the ending epsilon iota nu to create it. And this is usually translated. This is most of the time, at least normal uses of infinitives can be translated to verb, to loosen, to love. But an infinitive doesn't play the role of a verb in a sentence, right? We don't say that to loosen as the verb in our sentence. You have some other verb, like I want to loosen. I don't like to run. I desire to something else. So that's called a complementary infinitive or a supplementary infinitive. They're slightly different, but close enough. And notice that in those sentences, the infinitive is not acting as a verb, it's acting as a noun. It's something you want to do. It is something you need to do. Need the to verb, right? So infinitives are complicated. They're going to do a bunch of things in Greek. We'll learn that they do slot into verbal positions in certain kinds of constructions. For now, learn this as to verb, and think about this as just sort of that verbal idea is basically what it is. It's a way of sort of naming, not saying he's running, she's running. It's a way of talking about running. And so we, in English, most often will say to run. Sometimes we also say running, right? So you can say, I like to run, or you can say, I like running. And that construction, it's confusing because that construction is functioning like an infinitive as well. Which we can talk more about if you care to. But basically the idea is a way of referring to the concept, the idea of that verbal action. The forms that you need to memorize for this chapter this will be the time-consuming part, is you really, really need to know this. So these are your masculine, singular, and plurals on the left column, and your neuter, singular, and plurals, and these are all of them for this set of spellings. So, ha kalas tu kalu, I guess agra, ha agras tu agru, to agro, tan agran, and then if you're talking to a field, I guess you could use the vocative, say, oh agre, oh field, stop, please produce for me or something, whatever. And now you have the plurals. Hoi, ton, tois, tus. Those articles will be your friend. Memorize those articles. Hoi, ton, tois, tus. And then the plural endings look just like it. So you should have, I hope, noticed by now that pretty much the articles are just tau in front of the ending. The only exception to that is the nominative singular, right? Nominative singular and plural. Although the plural is pretty much that. It's just a rough breathing instead of a tau. Actually, in both cases, that's what's going on, basically. So, ha agras but is the sort of outlier, but tu agru, to agro, tan agran. Memorizing these endings and memorizing these articles is not two separate things at this point. It's the same set of endings. They also give you the neuter, which is identical to the masculine, except for the nominative and accusative, which is what we saw with the singular, right? So the nominative plural is ta, and the accusative plural is ta, right? Neuters will always have indistinguishable nominative and accusative forms, and this only occasionally produces problems. The Greeks were smart just like us. They were aware there were ambiguities in their language, and they didn't have the need to fix this most of the time, so it doesn't actually create issues most of the time, and it won't be a problem in practice for us. So there's your forms. Do memorize these. If it's helpful, I'll take the last minute of my talk to just review what each of these does. The nominative, hoikalas agras, would be if a beautiful field was your subject. So of course, hoikaloi agroi would be, the beautiful fields are your subject. So you could say something like, the beautiful fields are large, right? Hoi kaloi agroi eisen are, and then you put an adjective on that. Makroi are large. The beautiful fields are large. The genitive is going to be best to translate most of the time, for now at least, with the word of. So something of the beautiful field. Tu kalu agru means of the beautiful field. Dative is going to be to or for. This is a sort of cheat. Of course, we're going to learn that's much more complex later. But for now, think of genitive as basically of, which is doing this work of characterizing. It's a noun that is doing the work to characterize another noun. So you could say, he's the man of the beautiful field. Kind of a strange way to describe a person, but if there was some context in which it was relevant to describe someone as the man of the beautiful field, genitive is how you would do that. Dative is to or for, the indirect object, some noun that's benefiting from the action. So, please send this letter to the beautiful field. Or, tois kalois agrois, please send this letter to the beautiful fields. A little strange. But notice that is benefiting. It is the sense of sending to or for. We'll use a different construction to say, like, where are you traveling towards? We've seen use eis or pros for that. Good. So tois kalois agrois might be, I'm buying this grain for my beautiful fields, for the benefit of those fields. Sending a letter is the one place where this sort of gets sloppy, where you send a letter usually for something, or with a dative construction, and they think about that differently than the sort of walking to a field. That can be a little confusing. We'll unpack it when we get in this chapter, when this book properly introduces the dative to us. So far, they're giving it to us primarily in prepositional context, when a preposition is governing a dative. Lastly, the accusative is the direct object, receiving the action of an object. So if you're going to buy a beautiful field, you're going to say you're going to buy ton kalan agran, or you're going to buy multiple beautiful fields, you're going to buy tus kalus agrus. Vocative is direct address. If you're going to talk to a beautiful tree, ho kala dendra. Notice that the plural vocatives are identical to the nominatives, which is normal.